Hi, I'm Ross Tayler. Welcome to Sacred Sundays, a space to slow down, tune in, and return to what's sacred within and around you. Some weeks you'll hear a sound-based offering to open the space. Other times we'll simply begin in conversation. However it unfolds, this is an invitation into presence, connection, and the beauty of the unseen. So pour a cup of tea, settle in, and let's begin. Today we welcome Leslie Brown, a trauma-informed facilitator and embodiment coach, passionate about supporting people to connect deeply with themselves through understanding what it is to be a human being in today's world, and embracing all aspects of that. Through her work, she guides individuals to build the skills that bring balance, freedom, and a more grounded spirituality into daily life. Leslie's holistic approach integrates nervous system awareness with practical tools for living authentically, making the path of personal growth not just something you think about, but something you feel and embody. Welcome, Leslie.
Thanks so much for having me, Ross.
So good to have you here. I believe you're going to start by guiding us through a embodiment exercise.
Yeah, my hope is to talk you through a little bit of a closed eye exercise that is going to give you a real visceral sense of your body or your system in protection or in growth.
That sounds great.
Yeah. Okay, shall we dive right in?
Go for it.
Okay, awesome. So, yeah, I think always let's just start by coming into our body and into our breath. Just taking a couple of really intentional, deep breaths. And as we notice those deep, intentional breaths, just scanning our body, just noticing, no need to judge or fix, just noticing what's present, tuning into sensations, temperature, tension. And now I'd like you to take your left hand and I want you to think of something that you really value, something that's important to you. It could be a person or relationship. It could be a belief that you hold. It could be a value. It could be an item. But I want you to just imagine that you can hold this thing of great importance in the palm of your left hand. And now I invite you to close that hand and create a fist around this item that you really treasure. And now, using your right hand, I want you to start to try and open that fist. But your left hand is going to protect this item, this thing, this person, this value, this belief. It's going to protect it. So I want you to keep that fist closed with the left hand, but try and see with your right. Try and open that fist. And just as you're trying to open that fist, just noticing, tuning in. Notice what's happening in your body. Notice what's happening to your breath as you try and open that left fist. And again, just noticing what sensations are present, anything that feels different or noteworthy. And now, keeping that left fist closed, let's just stop trying to open it with that right hand. And just taking a nice deep breath. And now I invite you to take that right hand and use it to just hold that fist. Just cradling your left fist in your right hand. And again, just noticing. Tuning into any sensations. Tuning into your breath. Noticing any changes. And now I invite you to just open both of those hands. Just maybe give them a little shake out. Mhm. Bring them back to wherever they feel like being. And just one more nice deep breath. You can open your eyes back up and come back to this shared space. How is that for you, Ross?
That was great. I love that.
Yeah.
There's an exercise I do that involves two people and making a fist. And this one I really appreciated. Well, I went through a range of emotions, which was surprising. And
Ooh.
part of what I noticed was just how strong my hand was holding that protection, which was interesting. There was nothing I could do to open it.
Yeah. Beautiful. And that's what I love about, obviously, with a title like an embodiment coach, my work is really to support people to get into their bodies. And what I love about this really simple exercise is, even myself, if I've done this exercise once, I've done it literally 100 times with varying groups and audiences. And in such a short period of time, it does this beautiful job of really connecting us to this visceral experience of, when I'm fighting with that fist, trying to get it open, and just, what that creates in my system, how my body responds to that, how my mind responds to that, and then seeing the stark contrast of just cradling that fist.
Mhm.
So, what did you notice in terms of the difference between the two?
Well, I noticed with the first one how much energy was being devoted to
Mhm.
keeping that fist closed, and I noticed my shortness of breath. I wasn't breathing. I was like really stuck in some
Mhm.
ways, really
Mhm.
focused. And then the moment that my right hand came across and was nurturing and supportive, my nervous system just regulated so quickly.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It's really quite phenomenal how quickly that shift can happen, isn't it?
Hmm.
I think that's one of the really powerful pieces. I mean, it's easy to look at some quick experience like this and think, "Oh yeah, that's really interesting, neat difference," right? And the value is recognizing that, like you said, not only is that change able to happen at a very quick rate, but that we're going through both of these experiences moment to moment. At any moment, the smallest little thing might create that protection in my system, resulting in, like you said, the shortness of breath and the tension and that often strong emotions, right? And in essence, in that moment, we're activating the sympathetic nervous system, right? And that brief moment of cradling, and I love the word you use of nurturing, right? Of just nurturing that thing that I value, I'm able to start to lower that activation and come back into a parasympathetic state.
Hmm. And to do that for yourself is the
Yes.
other thing that's a little bit interesting, because there's an exercise of putting your hand on your heart.
Mhm.
And that one for me is harder to really sense and feel. But with
Mm,
this one, I could really feel that support and nurture in a different way.
yeah. Well, and I think there's the key element there is just allowing ourselves to imagine that we are protecting something,
Hmm.
right? So we connect at a deeper level right away. And the reality is that all of us are walking around all day, every day, protecting things, whether
Right.
we're conscious of it or not.
Right. And that's a perfect segue into how many of us do you think are walking around in that state without realizing it? Like we're in that fight or flight and have no idea that we are.
I want to say pretty much all of us.
Yeah.
I wish I had really solid data on that, Ross,
Yeah.
but my hunch is that most, if not all of us.
Yeah.
And again, to varying degrees, right? I think that many of us have built the awareness, or naturally have the awareness to recognize when we're in heightened states of sympathetic response. But I think there's a nuanced degree that really our whole societal makeup encourages some level of sympathetic activation
Hmm.
very consistently.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about listeners who may not have this grammar around nervous system.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could kind of bring some clarity to that for them.
Absolutely. And so I think on the really common language that I think many of us are familiar with, when I'm talking about the sympathetic or parasympathetic, our sympathetic is the activation where we're in that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. Whereas the parasympathetic state is when we're in that sort of rest and digest. So there's obviously those terms bring a lot of clarity in terms of what that looks like. And each state creates a whole cascade of physiological changes within our bodies and our systems, right? It impacts our cognitive system, it impacts our emotional system. Obviously it's driven by the nervous system, but it's also going to impact blood flow and cardiovascular, how we're breathing, the hormones we're producing at the time, right? So there's such a domino effect depending on which state we're in.
Why would this be important to someone to understand this?
I think twofold. I think one, because the more that the science of our bodies, our nervous systems, and how we operate as a species, the more advanced that becomes, the more we understand how integrated we are and how one thing affects another. Really nothing happens in isolation in our whole being. And so again, I feel that our society today and the way we navigate life has so many elements that are really conducive to being in that fight or flight state more often than we realize. And I think that undermines us in so many ways. And unfortunately, I mean, I think things are moving in the right direction, and I've seen some wonderful initiatives. But for example, you and I didn't get taught how to regulate ourselves in school, and many of us weren't even taught that by our parents,
Right.
right?
Absolutely true. Yeah.
And so I think it's such an important skill. And what I've seen in terms of patterns with those that I work with is they reach these places of plateau, whether that's in terms of their own growth or development or evolution, or in just, this desire to enhance our own personal gifts or have a more authentic expression of ourselves in daily life or to feel like a more spiritual being. And oftentimes our nervous system is this forgotten element that is really undermining the creation of our desired results in whatever area.
When I came to your talk in Parksville a few months ago, you used this metaphor that I thought was so brilliant and so powerful, which was about the white noise in our system.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this was kind of the light bulb moment for me in recognizing the value in my own personal life and the importance of understanding how my system is operating. But I had this really profound transformational experience with a one-on-one program called Prime Potential, which I am a facilitator of at this point. But early in my training, of course, I experienced it myself. And after the fact, I had this really noticeable change in my level of coordination, which sounds kind of silly and irrelevant, but I was able to notice like, wow, I'm way more skilled with my hand-eye coordination than I've ever been. What is this about? That's the way that my mentor, Lynn Samita, described it to me was, Leslie, just think about all of the background noise in your nervous system that we cleared with that process. And as soon as she said the words, it was sort of naming the experience that I was having, and it just all kind of dropped in that moment. I liken it to having that range hood on above the stove. I use it frequently when I'm cooking, and inevitably when I turn it off, I'm always shocked at how much it was impacting me without me noticing it until I stopped it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's similar. I think so many of us have so much of this kind of this activation, this white noise happening in our system, and it's bogging us down without us recognizing it.
Yes. And I guess it was about 2019 when I first became aware of the nervous system, and I was studying Deb Dana, who talks about polyvagal theory in a way that is very relatable.
One of my favorite books.
Yeah, she's amazing. And she takes all this science from Stephen Porges and she just makes it so digestible and so easy to understand and so relatable to the work that we do.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I think it's at the core of everything. Like, I think everything that we have a label for in one way or another could come back to nervous system dysregulation. Whether
Absolutely.
there's not science fully there to prove that yet. I think there's probably a lot of resistance to that being true because of the systems that surround some of the support that gets provided for things like anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
But what I love about this topic is, and really that's part of why I brought you on the podcast, was to talk this out, because I think it's such a valuable insight for anyone, no matter what they're going through.
Well, absolutely. And when you take that body of work around polyvagal theory and you combine it with the work of Bruce Lipton and you look at his sort of principles of recognizing growth mode and protection mode, which really is at the effect of the nervous system. And so it's similar to in our body, right? We can't flex our bicep muscle and our tricep muscle at the same time because they are opposing forces. So our system will not perform that function, right? It is one or the other. So similarly, we cannot be in both growth mode, in other words, with presence and openness and curiosity, and protection mode at the same time. We can only be in one or the other.
Right. And you described the white noise covering up our gifts. So what kind of gifts can emerge when that white noise starts to disappear?
Anything. I mean, again, I noticed it because my daughter had decided she loved volleyball. And so I was kind of helping her to practice and hone her skills and I mean appreciate I've never been a super skilled sporty person in any area of my life. For example, I felt more skilled in that sort of physical endeavor. And I also personally noticed just a sudden deepening in my spiritual connection. And then I also started noticing other gifts. You know, my intuition definitely became stronger, not to mention my confidence in my own intuition. And then, you know, my experiences, I mean, it's still all very new and somewhat exciting / scary for me. But, you know, I also started recognizing like there might be some mediumship alive and well in me, which was a totally unexpected element. And so in working with others, I've seen them, you know, really leverage the support of their nervous system to kind of break through barriers where they've seemingly plateaued in terms of any of their energetic or spiritual gifts. And just our ability to attune and co-regulate is greatly enhanced in my experience.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And also not surprising, because so many of us, I believe, are living from our mind and not our body. Like, we're literally disconnected from our body for all sorts of reasons. And I don't just say that speculating. I live that. And in some ways I continue to live that. Like, I'm still working with those pieces, but it's so clear that we can't think our way through this because the body is the majority of the equation of how to solve the problem.
Well, and Ross, I think that's where a lot of us also hit a bit of a wall where we're unknowingly blocking ourselves because, you know, the reality is that what I know and understand on an intellectual level doesn't automatically integrate or become something that I express at any deeper level. So I think that as a species, we've become so comfortable living in our intellect, right? That it's bred more and more of this disconnect from the rest of our body. And yet our mind is really great at lying to us. So of course it's going to tell me that if I know it, I must be doing it and I must be skilled at it, right?
Right.
And yet how many of us listening today can say, oh yeah, I know many or at least one person that I see on the regular who is not aligned or congruent, who isn't walking the talk, right? They're
Right.
saying one thing and doing another. And that's a perfect example of someone who probably has a really solid intellectual understanding, but
Hmm.
hasn't moved that understanding beyond the intellect.
Sure.
Mhm.
And it makes me think of like in human design, which is a body of work that I'm involved in. And it's essentially a map of our energy, a map of who we are. And one of the things in human design is 99% of us make decisions from somewhere in the body, not the
Mhm.
mind.
Mhm.
Only 1% make decisions from the mind. And then in the different places of the body are our different gifts. So it really supports what you're talking about of these gifts rising up when we start to connect with our body and reduce the noise, which a lot of that is conditioning and our experiences and the patterns that we're stuck in, so many things. But the
Mhm.
moment that space starts to open up, these things like you mentioned, intuition and clarity and motor skills and then these deeper gifts that start to emerge that we had no idea they were there.
Absolutely. And I think, you just did a really beautiful job of a great explanation for anyone who's like, "Oh, I've been taking active steps towards this desired result."
Hmm.
I've been making conscious choices to have more of this or less of that, and I'm still not getting it. Right?
Right.
And that tells us that those bodily decisions that we're not connected to are running counter to our goals.
I worked in addiction treatment centers, and in the latter part of that work, it was working with more severe addicts. And I had all this awareness of nervous system teachings, and I thought to myself, wow, it's like the moment that person is, or they can have all the desire to change that behavior, but their nervous system is overriding everything
Mhm.
that they can try to do. And it
Mhm.
really made me a little bit concerned because of the model we were working in. It's like I couldn't really fully bring in all these teachings
Right.
and the knowledge that I had. But it was like, you think about that moment where someone has done a 6-week program and they get back home again and they're presented with the opportunity to use, and their whole body is firing in all sorts of different ways. And their rational brain is going offline
Mhm.
and they're being hijacked without knowing it.
Yep.
And then they make a choice that isn't really their choice because their body is making the decision.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
complicated. And I don't feel like that's being talked about enough.
Yeah, the company that I've been fortunate enough to have been working with and become a partner in is called Expanding You. And this is really the premise of what we are teaching and empowering people with. And one of the most common challenges is in so many ways, what we're talking about today is likely going to make a lot of sense to a lot of people.
Hmm.
And because it makes sense, again, it's tricky for us to really honestly evaluate ourselves and how well we're doing with living that understanding. So how do you really demonstrate to someone who has done a ton of work and is, really smart and knows
Sure.
a lot of stuff and for all intents and purposes, I'm encouraging people to go back to what many want to label basics because,
Right.
again, we have the understanding, but we haven't developed the skills,
Hmm.
right? So, how do we support that person who is putting in the time and the energy to move beyond their addiction? How do we support them to build the skills that are required so that they're not so easily or quickly hijacked by their nervous system when it matters most?
Right. I guess that's the other piece is it's not necessarily a quick fix
Mm-mm.
because it's twofold. You're doing the work of repatterning the conditioning that took place
Hmm.
and at the same time building resilience within the nervous system to be able to face those challenges in a different way.
Exactly.
And traditionally, most of the models that are being used are cognitive, whether
Hmm.
it's CBT or other things. It's very cognitive,
Yeah,
and that's only a part of the equation.
absolutely. And it does require constant, regular, repetitive steps.
Right.
That's how we exercise neuroplasticity. That's how we learn something new, is by doing it over and over again, right? So that we learn the skill and develop the mastery,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. And back to this white noise piece, I, for the longest time, didn't realize that I was dysregulated,
Mm-hmm.
but also like in a low level way. And
Yeah.
in just this like little tiny bit of noise that was always there, and just accepted it as normal. That's the way it is. And it wasn't until returning to Vancouver Island, actually just in March, that I got to recognize all the work that I had done, because back in 2012, when I was on the island, I was just always dysregulated.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this experience of, this is what it's like to feel regulated in a place where I only know it as being dysregulated.
Absolutely. I had a similar experience of recognizing, it's been a gradual unpacking over the last number of years of just realizing how much low level, and not oftentimes not low level,
Hmm.
but a consistent low level anxiety and dysregulation happening in my system. And
Right.
and the beautiful double-edged sword of our species is that we are highly adaptable, right? So whatever, our brain is only wired to survive. So whatever happens on a regular basis that doesn't kill me, my system says, okay, good enough,
Right.
right? And so we'll just adjust and adapt and make that our new normal.
And then the other thing is, we're reacting to the perceived bear that is chasing us when it's not actually a bear. Like
Hmm.
we're applying this level of nervous system activation to situations that aren't necessarily aligned with actual threat.
Absolutely. It's as simple as the quality of our news. There's a heightened focus on negativity and fear, which I'm not labeling that as right or wrong or good or bad. And it's not overly supportive to heightened states of regulation.
Hmm.
Similarly, just the everyday struggles of making ends meet and the expectations of an individual and performance, and the shoulds and the shouldn'ts, and keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak, right? There's so many ways we perceive we should be to be worthy, right? That then create this sense of, like you say, being chased by the bear that doesn't exist,
Hmm.
right?
So I'd love it if you said more about the spiritual connection that can emerge and
Mm-hmm.
the intuition, however you'd like to speak about that. But I feel like it's an important piece to kind of flesh that out a bit more, because it is the benefit of doing this work. One of
Yeah,
the many benefits.
definitely. Yeah, I think if we look at our intuition, for example, many of us would label our intuition as a quiet voice, right? I mean, one of the ways we can differentiate between fear or anxiety and intuition is our intuition doesn't have a sense of urgency, right? It's a deep knowing. It's not a must do this right now. And in order to be able to tune in to a less urgent, more quiet voice, I'm not going to hear that over the range hood, right? I need to turn that white noise off to be able to find that place and space of stillness within where I can connect to that inner knowing. And I think that's similar in relation to our own individual spiritual journeys. For me, the moments where I feel the most universal love and experience moments of non duality and oneness and feeling connected to all that doesn't happen when I'm running around grocery shopping and planning out my week. That happens when I'm cultivating quiet moments of stillness, both internally and externally. So, the more that we can cultivate this ability to regulate ourselves, again, recognizing that's something that's constantly in flux, and as it should be, right? We're not meant to be in any one fixed state.
Hmm.
right? But when we can build that skill to notice, okay, there's some level of sympathetic activation. I am in some version of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. When I can notice that, now I'm empowered to do something about it.
Right.
And now I can make those choices that support that parasympathetic, that allow me to come back into breath, back into body. Another great reference point is, just the teachings of Dan Siegel and his hand model of the brain, right?
Hmm.
Just understanding how disconnected we become when we are in that fight or flight mode.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, that visual is really helpful and powerful of you're flipping your lid.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I really wanted to open with that sort of felt experience of when you were trying to open your fist to varying degrees, your lid was flipped, right? My lid does flip when I'm trying to fight against protection,
Hmm.
right? And so things like this are really helpful for us to start to tune in. My greatest skill that I learned was just simply noticing. For me, as soon as I'm activated in any way, I lose my belly breath. I start
Hmm.
breathing shallow and I notice tension in my stomach. So I just got really good at tuning into my stomach because
Right.
in a moment's notice I could assess where my nervous system was at least to a general understanding.
Well, and that's where so many of the nerve endings are from the
Mm.
vagus nerve. They terminate in the stomach. And so when we get sick to our stomach by something, by some experience,
Mhm.
that's partially why. I mean, I used to have so much anxiety years ago that I would get sick to my stomach, and it caused all sorts of issues at conferences that I was at, and the anxiety of thinking I was going to have to speak and all sorts of things. And to learn about the nervous system and make that connection, I was like, oh, no wonder I had all those experiences.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And that's it's so powerful when we reach these points of understanding because they create that little bit of space,
Hmm.
right? Again, one of the things that can be so counter to this growth and development is when that negative self-talk chimes in, right?
Right.
As soon as I go to that, oh dang, I'm activated again. Right? I'm making matters worse. So then it's also cultivating that loving compassion. Oh, look, there I am again, right?
Hmm.
Okay, what's next? What am I looking for in this moment?
And I think it's important to mention explicitly, and I think we've alluded to it, but this is a system that is designed to help us.
Mhm.
It's there to keep us safe. It's not working against us. And so if we can start to align with these teachings and support ourselves and to notice the signs, just like the check engine light on your dashboard,
Mhm.
right? And this is the thing. We don't want to put a piece of tape over it. We want to work with it.
Exactly. And to recognize that yeah, it was the system that was designed to support us and to help us survive, but it's somewhat outdated in a sense, right?
Hmm.
The
Exactly.
ways in which we existed when it came to be are very different from today's circumstances.
Very different. So
Yeah.
true. Yeah. And I think that, circling back to that exercise at the beginning, to think about all the situations in our lives that are creating that level of protection,
Mhm.
and some of which we might have a perception we can't control. And I think what I love about this teaching is that the ability to work with it is actually within me.
Absolutely.
And it's completely in my control to regulate myself. And
Mhm.
there's so many tools out there to help me do that.
Yeah. And that's the wonderful reality of today. We have so much supportive information readily available at our fingertips that, there's a million different regulation exercises you can find on the internet, right? And all you have to do is just commit the time to finding the one that really works for you, that lands well.
Hmm. If you could share one important thing about these teachings that you would want someone to know, what would you say?
Hmm. As much as a part of me wants to create something poetic and impactful, I I think it's as simple as What we're talking about today, Ross, is the foundations of being a human being. And so they are as normal and natural as your fingers and toes. And really it's about learning how to understand and work with my system, with myself, with my heart, with my mind, right?
Right.
Rather than wronging it or fighting against it.
And it makes me think, if anybody hasn't seen it, to look it up. Like, what does the vagus nerve look like as it travels through the body, and all the different pathways? And it's quite spectacular. It's like, wow. And it really does connect my mind, my body, and my spirit. It is all
Absolutely.
those three things that runs through those pathways. And so it is us. I don't think I said this yet, but I really get jazzed up about it because this is the one thing that we definitely all have in common.
Yes.
We
Yes.
all have a nervous system.
Hmm.
So despite what we see on the outside, the things that are going on the inside are all grounded in this system.
And I think when we learn to understand and work with that system, we will feel the positive ripple effect in every aspect of our lives.
Right. Because instead of pointing a finger, we can have the conscious awareness that, oh, I'm in front of someone who's dysregulated. They're
Hmm.
not actually grounded in themselves as they're speaking.
Hmm.
And we can find the compassion and the care for that, perhaps.
Absolutely.
All right. So this feels like a good place to wrap up.
Hmm.
And I always like to ask a question at the end, which is, what's one simple way that someone could connect with the sacred today?
Well, I think it's as simple as just cultivating that moment of presence. So closing your eyes and tuning into your breath and just allowing even one single moment of stillness. And better yet, if I can find that spark of appreciation in that moment of stillness and to see, thank you. Thank you to this incredible body, this incredible nervous system that has carried me all this way.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So grateful that you were able to join me today for this conversation and the layers that you brought to this topic, which is it's got lots of nuance to it. There's lots of information that you can find. And I think the more we can simplify it, the more it becomes accessible. And I think you do a really great job of that. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm always happy to share with folks like you. So thank you so much, Ross.
You're welcome. And if anybody wants to find you, where's the best place for them to find you? And we'll share your links and everything in the notes as well.
Yeah, best place to find me if you're looking to do one-on-one work is at lesliebrowncoaching.com. But you can also find group programs on this topic at expandingyou.com. And that's expanding YOU.
Excellent. Thank you. And to everyone listening, thank you for tuning in. Until next time, take good care. Thank you for joining us here on Sacred Sundays. I hope something in today's offering spoke to your spirit, stirred something true, or simply gave you a moment to breathe. You can find more Sacred Sundays episodes, as well as other conversations from the Sacred Village podcast at sacredvillagepodcast.com. Feel free to share this episode with someone who might need it. Until next time, may your Sunday be slow and sacred. Bye for now.